Picture a space without edges. No colours, no sounds, no trace of form. It is not darkness as we know it, because even darkness has weight and shadow. This is different. It is a kind of stillness that stretches forever, where nothing takes place and nothing yet exists. For the ancient Greeks, everything begins here, in what they called chaos. But chaos is not a storm, not anger, not destruction. It is more like a pause before the first breath, an opening at the start of possibility. At first, this vast expanse feels empty, but we can sense something just beyond the stillness. Imagine standing on a shore at night, waiting for dawn. The air holds no movement, yet it also holds the quiet promise that something must arrive. From this potential, subtle presences begin to stir. They do not burst forth with sound or flash. They appear softly, as though the endless void blinks once, and with that blink, the seeds of future life come into being. The first to appear is Gaia, the earth. She is not yet the mountains, valleys, or flowing rivers we might picture. At this point, Gaia is more like the idea of solid ground, the sense that somewhere stable now exists in a sea of nothing. Alongside her comes Nyx, the night, veiling the space in mystery. Nyx spreads like an endless cloak, not frightening, but calm, a reminder of rest and renewal. And then arises Eros, love, not the playful figure with wings from later tales, but the raw, primal force that pulls things together, sparks connection, and makes creation possible. These early beings do not speak or laugh, nor do they yet resemble human form. They are more like the weight of emotions we feel. Gaia is like the steady reassurance beneath our feet. Nyx is the hush of a night sky, and Eros is that invisible tether between hearts. The Greeks told these stories not to predict scientific beginnings, but to help explain feelings that still shape our lives. The longing for safety, the comfort of night, and the pull we feel toward one another. Think of chaos as the blank canvas, an expanse waiting to be painted. Gaia spreads across it like the first wash of colour. Nyx curls through it with shadows. Eros flickers like small embers, whispering that even from nothing, connection will grow. Suddenly the emptiness feels less hollow. It becomes a cradle, carrying possibilities within it. Though those possibilities are still quiet, still raw. As we imagine this shift from void into presence, notice how gentle it is. Creation does not begin with a roar or a clap of thunder here. It begins almost like a thought crossing a drowsy mind. Chaos does not vanish with the appearance of Gaia, Nyx, and Eros. Instead, it lingers, reminding us that it has never been a place of ruin. Rather, it is a state where anything might unfold. Far from frightening, it is freeing. In chaos, no rules exist yet. No limits, no hierarchy of gods. If you pause now and breathe slowly, you might feel how this myth reflects something within us. The Greeks were weaving stories that mirrored the quiet beginnings we sometimes sense in our own lives. The few seconds before an idea takes shape, the brief calm before we decide to step forward. They did not see chaos as destruction, but as an endless pool of beginnings, waiting to be touched by presence. From this pool, Gaia grows more noticeable, and here the story begins to turn toward her influence. She is not restless like the wind, or fleeting like shadow. She is steady, patient. Even without form, she gives the impression of roots anchoring down. Night, in the figure of Nyx, softens everything around her. Love, embodied by Eros, ensures these elements do not stay apart forever. What this means is that even the myths of gods and battles start with something simple. The recognition that stillness, darkness, and love are foundations of existence. Picture again the limitless void. Now see it shift slightly. There is a floor beneath, faint at first, but strengthening as Gaia spreads wide. The night still presses close, a blanket stretched across her, and in between them a spark of desire, whispers that these presences will not remain alone for long. The nothingness we first pictured has now become a backdrop where creation begins to stir, gentle as breath. In this way, emptiness does not remain meaningless. It becomes the very seedbed from which gods, worlds, and whole stories can rise. The Greeks wanted us to see that without chaos, there is no space for creation. Without stillness, no movement would echo. And so, though it feels aimless at first, chaos is not a mistake. It is the first necessary step toward everything yet to come. What power could rise first when there was only stillness and no sound? In the silence after chaos, the ancients imagined the first sign of stability appearing. They called her Gaia, the earth. She is not the earth in the sense of soil under our feet, not yet dotted with trees or seas. Instead, she is the broad, quiet presence of ground itself. In the beginning, when all else felt weightless and undefined, Gaia was the sense of firmness, the base on which everything else might one day stand. To imagine her is to imagine the comfort of finally sitting down after endless drifting, knowing that something can be touched and held steady. Gaia is often spoken of as a mothering presence, though her motherhood is not simple. She nourishes, yes, but she also contains within her the raw power of life. That power includes the promise of plenty, but also the inevitability of struggle. Within the surface, she embodies our hidden forces, waiting for their time. The seeds not yet released, the forms pressed deep within her body. From the start, Gaia is not just gentle earth to stand upon. She is also heavy, with the weight of what might come to challenge her own calm surface. Like the ground that shakes beneath us in storms and quakes, she shows that what feels steady can also rise with unrest. Still, Gaia's story cannot be told alone. The myth spoke next of Uranus, the sky. He appeared as if from her, broad and high, his expanse stretching endlessly above. Uranus seemed shaped to match her perfectly, as if drawn down to cover her. The Greeks pictured them joined so closely that the sky itself pressed against the earth in unbroken embrace. In their closeness was both tenderness and confinement. Imagine lying on the ground and feeling the sky lower, pressing down like a ceiling. The image is one of unity, but it is also heavy, without gap or breath. The bond of Gaia and Uranus represents more than a story of lovers or partners. It is the joining of two essential elements, ground and heavens, the beneath and the above. Night and day, rain and harvest, all depend on this interplay of sky and soil. Many cultures imagined this pairing as the balance that made life possible, a pattern we still live in. Crops need earth beneath their roots and rain to fall from above. Our own sense of belonging is shaped by the ground we walk on and the stars we look up to. To the Greeks, Gaia and Uranus embodied that timeless cycle, and their closeness became the foundation. Together, Gaia and Uranus brought forth many children. Yet these children were unlike ordinary offspring in human stories. They were elemental, forces in their own right. Their shapes and roles leaned toward the primal, figures who stood for mountains, seas, and the vast, untamed powers of the world yet to form. Each one waited within Gaia, dwelling beneath her surface, pressed between her body and the sky above. In this way, her role began to shift. No longer was she only the quiet presence of land. She now carried the future of creation within her. Yea, imagine Gaia in those early moments. She lies spread wide, supporting Uranus above, their union constant and without break. Beneath her surface is pressure, inside her stir new forms, immense and ancient, whose power cannot stay hidden forever. These unborn presences are like seeds pushed deep into the soil, just waiting for light and space to emerge. Their weight grows daily, heavy against their mother, yet there is no release. Gaia's gift of stability becomes also a burden, and what once seemed only calm begins to hold the tension of confinement. We might pause here and reflect on what this means. Earth, which feeds and grounds us, can also trap and restrain if left closed off. Soil holds seeds tight, mountains bury minerals deep within. Only when broken open do these hidden treasures reveal themselves. In this way, Gaia symbolizes not only comfort, but also the patience and the strain required before change takes place. Uranus above represents vast space, yet by pressing too close, he keeps her full power unseen. The myth carries in it an image of balance that leans toward imbalance. The closeness between earth and sky feels both natural and yet suffocating. Culturally, this tension spoke volumes. For people living within seasonal cycles, the earth was a source of both plenty and hardship. It was dependable beneath their feet, but also capable of failure in drought or famine. Marrying it with the sky reflected the dependence on weather and heavens, on rain and sun. When the two joined in balance, life thrived. When they became strained, life suffered. The myth framed this eternal relationship through Gaia and Uranus, embodying the balance every farmer, traveller and dreamer relied upon. As their children began to stir within Gaia, whispers of their power took shape. Some were called Titans, beings of immense strength and potential. Though they remained shadowed at first, hidden in her depths, these children are not yet named or free within this part of the story. They sleep inside her body, cramped beneath Uranus's embrace. The image becomes one of waiting, of potential growing restless in concealment. Gaia changes from the simple ground to a living force pregnant with futures, unable to release them. And so, what started as stillness evolves into tension. Gaia has shifted into the center of the tale. She is no longer only the stable platform, giving rise to sky and night. She is now the bearer of life, filled with a weight that will one day break into action. She has become both nurturing and strained, offering stability while hiding storms of change within. Uranus presses close, not knowing that in holding everything down, he is also sparking the need for revolt. If we listen closely, the myth whispers of a truth we feel in our own lives. Balance between growth and containment, closeness and freedom, must always be renewed. When one presses too hard, the other resists, and transformation begins to stir. Gaia embodies that process. Even as she supports life, she suffers under its hidden force, and inside her body, the children wait for release. This is where her role becomes central. She is not merely the stage upon which the gods will act. She is their mother, their container, the one whose body carries the weight of what comes next. Her stillness conceals the first true conflict, a conflict she cannot solve with gentleness alone. The story begins to turn towards secrecy as Gaia carries her hidden children beneath Uranus, already carrying the seed of a choice that will shape the fate of gods and skies alike. In this quiet way, Gaia transforms from the grounding presence that emerged gently from chaos into an active force of change. The earth is no longer passive, but purposeful. The sky presses down. The womb swells with hidden power, and the tension between nurturing and restraint grows heavy. From this soft but pressing moment, we move toward a deeper secret. For the weight she bears will soon demand release, though at great cost. And that secret is the prison of her children held inside her, waiting to see light for the first time. What happens when creation itself is forced inward? When what is meant to expand is pressed down and concealed? In the old stories, this is what Uranus, the sky, chose to do. He looked upon the children born from his union with Gaia and found in them something threatening. Instead of welcoming them into the open, he pressed them back within her, hidden from the world they were meant to shape. In doing so, he transformed his wife's fertile embrace into a prison. Gaia, once the steady presence of Earth, now carried inside her powers that strained to be released. Picture the image in simple terms. Inside the Earth rests seeds, small and waiting, meant to grow upward and find light. But imagine if someone pressed the soil heavier and heavier, piling stone upon it until nothing could sprout. That is what happened here. Uranus, in his fear, buried his children within Gaia, turning her into a heavy womb that never emptied. The children, who would later be named Titans, lay restless and unseen, their potential stifled by their father's need to control. There is a strange kind of silence in this stage of the myth. These beings are alive, but they do not see sunlight. They have power, but that power cannot yet move outward. Like a storm trapped inside closed walls, their unease builds steadily. For Gaia, this is not only physical heaviness, but also a growing sorrow. She has been transformed from the nurturing mother of all into the bearer of hidden sorrow, weighted not with joy, but with confinement. Why would Uranus do this? The story suggests fear. He saw the possibility of being surpassed, the risk that his own creations would topple him from his place above. Rather than face that chance, he smothered them before they could rise. It is a pattern, both ancient and familiar. Those in power often resist change, holding too tightly to what they have, rather than allowing new life to take its place. The myth gives this universal truth a dramatic shape, one we can still see reflected in the struggles of families, kingdoms, and even within ourselves. The children themselves are left in shadow. Their names and roles will one day be spoken. Oceanus, Hyperion, Themis, Rhea, and Cronus among them. But here, they are silent presences. Imagine the feeling of being trapped in darkness, without ever seeing the surface. It is like hearing only the distant hum of life above, without taking part in it. They were meant to spread across the world, to shape seas and skies. Yet, instead, they lay pressed under layers of earth. This tension simmers across every line of the myth, giving the sense that sooner or later, the stillness cannot last. For Gaia, this becomes unbearable. She is Earth itself, and the natural order of Earth is to bring forth, not suppress. Seeds open, rivers flow, forests spread. Everything about her being contradicts the state imposed upon her by Uranus. She aches with the need to release what she holds inside. Yet the sky above gives no space, no gaps through which her children can slip through. The closeness of Uranus, once intimate, now feels suffocating. His embrace has become a shackle. We might pause here and reflect on how this moment mirrors the cycles of life. When growth is forced inward, it always creates strain. A child grows impatient in the womb. An idea held too long without expression aches to be shared. Even emotions, when suppressed, begin to overflow at last. Gaia embodies this truth in the mythic sense, With every heartbeat, she longs to release her children into the world. Yet, bound by fear and pressed by sky, she suffers silently until the pain itself demands change. The Titans, though hidden, begin to gather presence in the imagination of the listener. They represent forces not meant to sleep forever. Their story does not start with glory, for even the strongest are sometimes born into shadow, waiting for their chance. We can picture them cramped in the deep, like mountains trying to push upward through stone, straining against the weight of their father. It is their restlessness and their mother's growing grief that sets the course for transformation. Uranus's action also tells us something about the nature of power. By hiding his children, he creates the very condition for his downfall. If fear drives every choice, new life will eventually push back. The more tightly one clings, the more inevitable the break. It is a truth woven into the cycle of generations. Parents give way to children, rulers to successors, and in mythic form, even gods must face the same law. Uranus may press down for a time, but he cannot keep creation locked forever. For listeners in ancient Greece, these images would have carried familiar meaning. They understood the heaviness of soil, the way seeds crack through earth despite resistance. They knew from farming and from watching nature that what is buried will seek the light. The myth turns this simple observation into a cosmic drama. Even gods cannot hold back growth. The story aligns with their daily lives, showing that hidden tension is not only part of the human world, but part of the divine order as well. Gaia, silent though she has been, begins to plot. She does not roar with rage, but she shapes a plan within, the way Earth quietly prepares new growth beneath the snows of winter. Her suffering turns into resolve. She will not remain the prison that Uranus has made of her. She begins to whisper to her children, still trapped inside, asking if they have the courage to rise when the moment comes. Though most of them shrink back from such defiance, one will one day answer. That figure is Cronus, bold enough to accept what she offers. Gimar. It is here that the Titans become something more than nameless presences. They become symbols of suppressed potential, forces that cannot remain hidden. Their story teeters in the edge of release, though not yet broken open. We leave them for now, still inside Gaia, restless and waiting. Their names will be spoken, their deeds remembered, but only once the courage of one child dares to strike against the sky itself. Gaia's quiet plotting has begun, and in her hands a secret tool soon takes shape. It is not born of violence, yet it will shatter the suffocating embrace of Uranus. And in this soft turning of the tale, the weight she bears starts to move toward resolution, carried in the resolve of Cronus, the child who will finally act. Who among the hidden children would be brave enough to strike the first blow? Inside Gaia, countless siblings stirred, but most remained quiet, afraid of acting against their father. Only one listened to her whispers and felt the strength to answer. That child was Cronus. Calm but watchful, he carried within him a sharpness unlike the others. Gaia, pressed by sorrow and weight, looked to him with both hope and desperation. Perhaps, she thought, one among her offspring might dare to change what seemed unchangeable. Cronus did not shrink back. He accepted, and with that choice, the air of silence began to break. To prepare him, Gaia shaped a tool. From within herself she formed a blade unlike any seen before. It was not straight like a spear, but curved into an arc. This was the sickle, a tool farmers would one day know as the instrument that reaps crops when harvest comes. In her hands, however, it became more than an instrument of gathering. It became a weapon, its curve suggesting a turning, a cycle bending from one order into another. Imagine its shape, sharp edge gleaming, fitted for both cutting and changing. Gaia offered it to Cronus, her hand guiding him toward the moment to come. The sickle's meaning reached far beyond its edge. It represented the act of severing, of breaking connections that had lasted too long. In daily life, the sickle cut grain to feed people for another season. In this story, it would cut gods from their place, clearing the ground for what must rise next. Time itself seemed present in that curve, the way days bend toward endings, and endings bend back toward beginnings. Cronus, by lifting it, was not just holding a weapon, but carrying the weight of what all cycles demand, change, even through pain. The night chosen for this act carried a quiet tension. Uranus, heavy and constant, descended again to lie across Gaia in his endless embrace. The sky pressed downward, as always, filling the Earth's surface with confinement. But this time, within Gaia's body, something stirred. Cronus crouched close, the sickle tight in his hands, waiting for his father's presence to narrow into reach. It was a night that felt ordinary to Uranus, yet to Gaia and her son, it carried the promise of a boundary about to break. Picture this moment. The sky, unaware, folds low across the Earth as it had done countless times. The Earth, heavy with children, trembles in silence. Cronus, steady and focused, waits. Then, in a swift motion, he lifts the sickle. The curved blade arcs across the space between sky and soil. With one strike, he severs his father's power. This was no small wound. It was the end of a binding that had lasted from the first moments of presence, when earth and sky touched without pause. Cronus, with Gaia beside him, broke that union.
This act reshaped the very structure of the world. Sky and earth pulled apart for the first time, creating space in between. The closeness that had seemed eternal was ended. With the strike, Uranus cried out, his power diminished, his hold broken. From his wound, blood fell down upon the earth. In the myths, this falling gave birth to new beings. The Furies, spirits of vengeance, the giants fierce and towering, and the Meliae, nymphs of the ash tree. In this way, violence did not bring only destruction, it also brought new life, new presences born from the very tearing of one order into another. The sickle stood at the centre of it all. Its blade cut not just the body of Uranus, but also the thread connecting the old world to the new. As its edge split one age from another, it reminded listeners that each turning of time carries pain and renewal. The sickle cuts grain so bread may be made. The sickle cut the sky away from earth so that life could expand. And in Cronus's grip, it carried the promise of freedom for the Titans buried so long within Gaia. Indeed, when Uranus fell back, the imprisonment ended. The Titans stepped into the world at last. Oceanus, Rhea, Hyperion, and the others blinked in the first space of freedom, crossing out of the shadow they had known only as confinement. Their chains, unseen yet heavy, disappeared with Uranus's collapse. In this moment they were freed, not by gentle persuasion, but by the hard line of the sickle's blade. Cronus, in the act of rebellion, became more than one child among many. He became the leader of a new order, the first to turn against stifling power and claim the space above. From this act, a new age began, one that placed Cronus at its head. He seated himself as ruler of the Titans, appointed not by kindness or consensus, but by the boldness of his hand. This was his victory, his liberation, and his mark upon the world's unfolding. Yet even as he rose, shadows lingered. For though the act carried freedom, it also carried its own consequence. Violence had birthed change, and change carried the seeds of further struggle. Gaia had hoped for deliverance of her children, and she achieved it. But the cycle of fear and overthrow had only just begun. You may notice how the story repeats a pattern found again and again. One generation supplants another. A father, fearing loss, suppresses his children.
So Cronus stood as ruler, his family free at last, the sky and earth now separated into vast expanse. He became the one others looked to, not just as a brother, but as king of a new age. Yet behind his rise was an uneasy silence, a knowledge that no ruler holds power forever. If he had overthrown his father through force, what would stop his own children from one day repeating the same? This whispering doubt would haunt him, just as surely as the sickle's curve curved back upon itself. In time, that dread will shape his own choices. But for now, the strike of Cronus marks the moment the universe turned, from tight embrace into open space, from imprisonment into freedom, from silence into the first great act of rebellion. The sickle's curved edge caught more than flesh. It caught the inevitability of time and change itself. And while the Titans stepped into the light, their new leader began to carry in his heart the very fear his father once carried. What if freedom itself carried the shadow of its own threat? For Cronus, standing tall as a new ruler after striking down his father, that question never left his mind. He had tasted victory, stepped into the open world with his brothers and sisters at his side. Yet even in the light of triumph, unease spread through him. A prophecy had been spoken, one that echoed the fate of Uranus before him, that one of his children, born from the womb of Rhea, would rise against him, just as he had risen against the sky. The cycle whispered of his own downfall. Cronus, who had cut open the path to power, now found himself clutching it too tightly, afraid it might slip from his hands. Fear shapes actions more than courage at times, and Cronus allowed his fear to hold sway. When his children were born, instead of raising them as heirs of his kingdom, he chose to devour them. One by one, as Rhea gave life to daughters and sons, he took them into his hands and swallowed them whole. It was not with cruelty in his face, but with dread in his heart. Each act was meant to silence the prophecy, to keep power intact forever. Yet as he gulped down what was his own blood and legacy, something more haunting took shape. The father transformed into a vessel of silence, carrying within his body the very life he had feared. Imagine for a moment the scene, a child barely greeted by the world, pressed against the warmth of the mother's chest, and before a lullaby can be sung, taken away, pulled into darkness. Rhea was left with empty arms, cradling absence rather than life. Her cries were soft and muffled, but they filled the space around her with despair. She bore many children, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, but none remained at her side. To be a mother, holding nothing, is to carry grief that does not fade. Each birth became another wound in her heart. For each end came the moment it began. Inside Cronus, the swallowed children rested in silence. They were not destroyed but suspended, living yet unable to act. Picture them dwelling within the hollow of their father's body, a strange gathering of brothers and sisters enclosed together in timeless dark. They could not touch the open air, nor reach for one another, but their presence stayed alive. To the Greeks, this image said something powerful. It showed that what is suppressed is never erased. Potential may be hidden and bound, but it waits, intact, for the chance to return. The act of swallowing also carried a deeper layer of meaning.
Cronus was not just ruler of the Titans, he was also linked with the passage of time itself. Time, like Cronus, devours what it gives. Youth becomes age, moments pass into memory, lives slip into shadow. By consuming his children, Cronus mirrored the slow, constant truth of time consuming everything it creates. Yet time cannot stop the birth of new days, and just as he could not destroy his children by swallowing them, so too does time never destroy completely. It transforms, it holds, it waits. Inside Cronus's body lay not only his own offspring, but the symbol of hours hidden away, waiting for the future to break through. Think of how this story would sound to those in ancient Greece. They watched the sun rise and fall, the seasons roll forward, and they knew that nothing lasts forever. To them, the devouring father was not only a god, but a reflection of what they felt each day. Time steals youth, even as it raises it. Time consumes harvest, even as hands prepare new fields. In Cronus's fear they saw an eternal truth, that no power, no life, no rule can escape the slow hunger of time. The Greek word for time itself, connected to Cronus, echoes this strange overlap between God and measure of existence. Yet even within this cycle of fear and loss, myths remind us that hope flickers. Rhea, broken by sorrow, could not bear the thought of losing another child. When her youngest was born, she turned not only to her own courage, but also to the guidance of Gaia, her mother. In a moment of quiet resolve, a plan formed. When Cronus came, expecting once again to consume, Rhea placed not the infant in his hands, but a stone. She wrapped it tenderly in swaddling cloth. Cronus, blinded by habit and fear, took the bundle and swallowed it whole, never knowing that his last child remained safe. The baby spared in this deception was Zeus. Hidden away from sight, his cries did not reach his father's ears. His presence did not weigh inside that terrible stomach with his siblings. Instead, he was carried across land to a mountain cave in Crete. There, unseen by Cronus, he grew in secret. His survival was no small detail. It was the only crack in Cronus's grip of fear, the single thread upon which the balance of the cosmos would tip. The stone itself became a symbol to the Greeks, remembered as the clever moment when fear was deceived by simplicity. A rock, wrapped like a child, freed the path for the future king of Olympus. It showed that not all victories come through weapons or rebellion. Some arrive through the soft patience of mothers, through the act of protecting quietly where force cannot win. What does this mean for us as listeners, drifting through this tale? It shows that cycles cannot be contained. The more one tries to hold back life, the more it slips through hidden places. Cronus feared the prophecy and thought consuming his children would erase it. Yet the prophecy was not undone. Instead, it was set in motion. His own actions planted the certainty of confrontation, for one child remained beyond his reach. We can picture Rhea watching her youngest nursed by nymphs in a cave, a sigh of relief escaping her for the first time after years of emptiness. She still mourned the others swallowed whole, but in Zeus she carried the hope that the cycle had not ended. In his quiet infancy, with the rustle of leaves outside and guardians standing near, the strain of old power already trembled. Cronus ruled with a stomach full of airs, and yet the one who mattered most slipped away. And so the story turns. The devouring father had swallowed nearly all his children, silencing his household under his fear. But in a hidden corner of the world beyond his sight, one small child grew stronger each day. That child was the promise the prophecy had spoken of, the spark that would rise against the Titan king. From the loss and silence of Cronus's hunger, a new voice waited quietly, ready to change the order of gods once more. Could a child raised in hiding truly reshape the heavens? That is the thought that carries us forward now. While Cronus ruled with fear, believing himself safe because he had swallowed all his children, far away in stillness and secrecy, another story quietly began. Rhea, unwilling to watch another newborn slip into darkness, placed her hope into this one child, the last of her line. She carried him across land and sea, heart full of grief, yet burning with resolve, and left him where his father's shadow would never reach, hidden in a cave on the island of Crete. Imagine that cave. It stood cool and dark, with its walls damp from the breath of the earth. Outside, the sea stretched wide, washing against the island's shore, but inside those stone chambers, the sound was muted, hushed into safety. Here a child named Zeus lived his first days, wrapped not in luxury, but in secrecy. His mother could not remain, yet she entrusted him to others who cared for him with devotion. Nurtured away from the Titan king, every soft cry, every tiny sigh, belonged not to a lost soul, but to a seed of change waiting for its time. Rhea entrusted Zeus to the care of gentle nymphs, spirits of nature who cherished the secret task of raising him. They held him, fed him, and cradled him against the quiet pulse of the earth. In this hidden place, milk and honey sustained him when no feast could be offered. The nymphs treated him not simply as a babe, but as a sign of hope, carrying into their daily care the knowledge that his life would one day decide the fate of gods and mortals alike. With each day, his tiny breaths filled the chamber with proof that Rhea's plan endured. Yet calm care alone could not hide him. Cronus still ruled the wide world beyond, and if he heard even a single cry, if a faint sound reached his ears, suspicion would rise. To keep the secret safe, guardians gathered around the cave. These were the Curetes, fierce protectors armed with bronze. They stood as a living wall between Zeus and discovery. Their duty was strange but vital. They clashed their weapons together, beating shield against shield, filling the air with a thunderous rhythm so loud that the infant's wails could never escape the cave. To Cronus, the sound above was no more than the echo of warriors at play. But to Zeus, it meant safety. His cries dissolved into the din, carried into nothingness, leaving no trace for his father to follow. Picture the scene in your mind. A newborn, resting in swaddling cloth, his body small against the stone floor of the cave. Above him, the clamour of metal striking metal rings out, masking each whimper. Around him, nymphs hum soft notes, soothing the child, giving comfort where noise would otherwise frighten. In this strange harmony, steel above, tender arms below, the king of gods awaited his future. The contrast is striking. The world outside remained under Cronus's shadow. Time seemed unmoving. The swallowed siblings slept in their dark prison, their father holding authority as if eternal. The seas, sky, and earth lay under the weight of his rule, but myths remind us that silence is never empty. While Cronus feasted on fear and pretended security, something greater was quietly gathering its strength. Zeus's childhood was not spectacular in outward show, but it became the slow pulse of destiny forming in secret. This part of the story carries what many traditions call the motif of the hidden child. Across countless cultures, heroes destined for greatness are born into danger. They survive not by open triumph, but by concealment. They grow in caves, forests, remote cottages, or under disguises, until the day they step forth. The Greeks gave us Zeus in a sacred cave. Other peoples told of young leaders raised far from courts or cities, fostered in shade, until their moment arrived. The pattern reflects a truth humans have always known. Change rarely begins with an open crown. Often, it starts in secrecy, in the quiet growth no one notices, until it is too late to resist. We might pause here and think of what it means. The hidden child grows not in comfort but in necessity. Zeus did not know palaces. He knew stone walls, damp earth, and the protection of humble caretakers. His cries were disguised under the clash of weapons, his every breath caught in balance between discovery and survival. This kind of upbringing forms more than strength. It shapes patience, resilience, and the knowledge that destiny does not always unfold in light. Sometimes it must first take root in shadow. Despite his smallness, every day Zeus lived was a challenge to his father's claim. With each passing moment, Cronus believed himself more secure, while the truth slept only a short distance away across land and sea. For the Greeks telling this story, that irony mattered. It was not raw power that undid Cronus at first. It was care, secrecy, and the courage of a mother defying fate. The mighty Titan was deceived by swaddling cloth wrapped around a stone, while the true threat to his reign grew from babyhood in obscurity. Inside the cave, young Zeus was no ordinary child. He carried in him not just his own life, but the weight of his brothers and sisters. Hestia, Hera, Demeter, Poseidon, and Hades all lay suspended within their father, their fates bound, their voices muted. For them, Zeus breathed. For them, he continued to live outside their father's stomach. His survival became their single chance, their waiting hope, as if countless generations looked through his small eyes, trusting him to rise one day on their behalf. From this hidden childhood came not only safety, but a gathering of strength. Each day spent in secret brought him closer to the path he would need to walk. Myths tell us that the greatest storms do not always begin with thunder. Sometimes they begin with silence, hidden in caves, carried in swaddling bands by arms that refuse to surrender. And so the world waited. Cronus ruled in false security. The Titans still held dominion, their chains of fear strong across the land. But far from that rule grew a single child, whose voice was dampened by beating shields, whose rest was guarded by nymphs, whose breath carried the faith of his mother. Could one child raised in concealment tear apart the rule of the devouring father? In time, that question would be answered. Zeus had survived the fate that swallowed his brothers and sisters. He lived in secret, quietly becoming the seed of a war that would shake gods themselves. It is here the story begins to turn toward that conflict. From the silence of his cave, Zeus would one day step into the open. His survival was no accident. It was preparation. And it was this hidden childhood that allowed the prophecy Cronus feared to take root, the promise that a new order was already stirring. How long does it take for sons to dethrone their fathers? In the story of Zeus and his siblings, the answer is not quick, not sudden, but stretched over 12 long years. That is how long the war for the cosmos lasted. A war not fought by mortals of flesh and blood, but by gods, ancient titans against younger Olympians. Imagine the exhaustion, not of people bound by time, but of beings who embody nature itself, locked in conflict for more than a decade, with the balance shifting back and forth, never tipping fully to one side. The struggle began when Zeus, grown from the secret child protected on Crete, chose to honor the whispers of prophecy. He faced his father directly and forced him to release what had been swallowed so long ago. Out of Cronus's body tumbled his children, now grown and alive, freed from that strange darkness where they had been held in suspension. Hestia, Hera, Demeter, Hades, and Poseidon returned to the world, blinking again under the open sky. No longer trapped, they stood alongside Zeus, bound by family, but more than that, united by a desire for justice. These siblings gathered together, forming the core of the Olympian side of the struggle. On the other side were the Titans, led by Cronus, and supported by brothers who had wielded immense strength since the time before gods had names. The Titans stood for the old order, the weight of tradition, and the rule that began before the Olympians were even born. Their power was vast and unyielding. Each side carried greatness, but that greatness meant neither could be easily undone. From the very first clash, it became clear this would not be a battle decided by days. The war stretched into long years. The land became the field, the mountains shuddered at impacts, and the sky itself echoed with the fury of forces meeting again and again. Yet, for all their strength, neither side could find final victory. Picture a war that feels timeless, with cycles repeating endlessly, attack and counterattack, shouts and silence. No hour gave lasting advantage. The Titans struck with raw and ancient might, while the Olympians fought with growing determination. Yet, neither could end the deadlock. For mortal listeners in ancient times, the notion of 12 years would have meant a span almost too long to imagine. Yet in myth, the passage feels heavier still. Gods do not tire as humans do. Their battles are not bound by hunger or sleep. Even so, the poets spoke of weariness, a deep fatigue weighing on both sides. The war felt endless, suspended in repetition. The world caught in a great pause until balance could break. Time itself seemed stretched thin by the stalemate, a reminder that even gods face the strain of effort without reward. It was in this period of struggle that Zeus realized sheer strength alone would never secure victory. Power met power, and both sides stood level. To alter the course, he needed more than equal force. He needed allies who had been forgotten. In Tartarus, the dark abyss beneath the earth, there were beings imprisoned long ago. The Cyclops, one-eyed smiths of immense craft, and the 100-handed giants, immense figures with arms enough to wield mountains, had been chained and hidden. Cronus himself had locked them away, fearing their strength. Zeus chose to release them. Imagine for a moment the gates of Tartarus swinging open. From the shadows emerged beings as strange and mighty as the oldest imagination could summon. The Cyclops blinked with single eyes, long imprisoned, yet burning with gratitude for their freedom. The 100-handed giants shifted and roared, each movement stirring the air, like entire forests shaking. Their alliance with Zeus was born out of debt and promise, a new wave of support that changed the balance. By choosing compassion, by freeing those locked in darkness, Zeus turned the war slowly toward his side. The Cyclops, in gratitude, gifted not just their strength, but also their skill. From their forges came weapons unlike any seen before. To Zeus, they offered the thunderbolt, a streak of fire and storm, immediate as a flash of sky. It was not only weapon but symbol, tying his very role as leader of gods to lightning and storm, things mortals already feared and worshipped. In his hand, the thunderbolt became the sign that he alone would command the heavens. Poseidon, his brother, received the trident, a long, three-pronged spear. It gave him the power to stir seas, to shake waves, to cause waters to foam and crash. With that weapon, he became the Lord of Oceans, the one to move ships and tides. Hades, the third of the brothers, received the helmet of darkness. It carried not flame or force, but silence. With it, he could become invisible, moving unseen among battlefields, striking while hidden. It was mystery, a reminder that even dread unseen holds immense weight. These gifts became not just tools of war, but marks of identity. Thunderbolt, trident, and helmet shaped each brother, turning them from simple rebels into figures tied with elements of the world itself: sky, sea, and dark beneath. By gaining these, they became more than equal to their father and uncles. They became the figures who could reshape the cosmos. Even with such weapons, the battle did not end instantly. But slowly, the balance shifted.
Power met power, and both sides stood level. To alter the course, he needed more than equal force. He needed allies who had been forgotten. In Tartarus, the dark abyss beneath the earth, there were beings imprisoned long ago. The Cyclopes, one-eyed smiths of immense craft, and the hundred-handed giants, immense figures with arms enough to wield mountains, had been chained and hidden. Cronus himself had locked them away, fearing their strength. Zeus chose to release them. Imagine for a moment the gates of Tartarus swinging open. From the shadows emerged beings as strange and mighty as the oldest imagination could summon. The Cyclopes blinked with single eyes, long imprisoned yet burning with gratitude for their freedom. The hundred-handed giants shifted and roared, each movement stirring the air like entire forests shaking. Their alliance with Zeus was born out of debt and promise, a new wave of support that changed the balance. By choosing compassion, by freeing those locked in darkness, Zeus turned the war slowly towards his side. The Cyclopes, in gratitude, gifted not just their strength but also their skill. From their forges came weapons unlike any seen before. To Zeus they offered the thunderbolt, a streak of fire and storm immediate as a flash of sky. It was not only weapon but symbol, tying his very role as leader of gods to lightning and storm, things mortals already feared and worshipped. In his hand, the thunderbolt became the sign that he alone would command the heavens. Poseidon, his brother, received the trident, a long three-pronged spear. It gave him the power to stir seas, to shake waves, to cause waters to foam and crash. With that weapon, he became the lord of oceans, the one to move ships and tides. Hades, the third of the brothers, received the helmet of darkness. It carried not flame or force, but silence. With it he could become invisible, moving unseen among battlefields, striking while hidden. It was mystery, a reminder that even dread unseen holds immense weight. These gifts became not just tools of war, but marks of identity. Thunderbolt, trident, and helmet shaped each brother, turning them from simple rebels into figures tied with elements of the world itself, sky, sea, and dark beneath. By gaining these, they became more than equal to their father and uncles. They became the figures who could reshape the cosmos. Even with such weapons, the battle did not end instantly. But slowly the balance shifted. The hundred-handed giants proved crucial, lifting entire stones, tossing boulders high, blocking titans from regaining advantage. The Cyclopes, beyond crafting gifts, fought beside their allies. Their strength, combined with the Olympians, created pressure that even the titans could not withstand forever. War dragged on still, but now the exhaustion pushed harder against Cronus's side.
What becomes of those who once ruled the earth when their power slips from their hands? After 12 long years of war, this question weighed upon the mighty Titans. They had been the unchallenged rulers, the beings born of Gaia and Uranus, whose strength seemed woven into the very stones and seas. But now, standing against their children, armed with fire, wave, and shadow, they began to falter. The balance had shifted, and though they fought with force that shook the ground, the tide turned toward the Olympians. The Olympians were no longer fragile rebels, but wielders of new gifts that defined the elements themselves. Zeus hurled thunderbolts, flashes of light and sound that struck the battlefield with fire and roar. Each bolt cracked across the sky, disrupting the confidence of the Titans, as if the heavens themselves had chosen sides. By his side, Poseidon shattered the seas with his trident, waves rising like walls before crashing down with punishing force. Hades, cloaked in his helmet of invisibility, moved unseen, striking from shadows, a reminder that even power can be undone by what cannot be seen. These weapons did not just harm the Titans, they pushed them back into fear, forcing them to defend against strikes from places they could not control. Picture the clash as it was told. Giants taller than mountains swung great axes and hurled boulders at their kin. Yet the 100-handed ones, freed from Tartarus by Zeus, caught those same stones and threw them back in multiplied fury. With arms beyond counting, they grasped crag and mountain, casting them down upon the Titans with rumbling force. The earth itself shook as rock met rock, as weight flattened the proud bodies of the old order. The air filled not only with the sharp sound of thunder, but with the dull crashes of mountain against mountain, wielded like weapons by beings of impossible form. The Titans tried to endure. Cronus led with desperation, even as weariness dulled his strikes. His brothers rallied, their power still terrible, but no longer supreme. The Olympians pressed them with energy that felt unending. 12 years had brought only stalemate before. But now the balance tilted, the endurance of the younger gods finally breaking the Titans' grip. For the first time, the children of Cronus and Rhea stood as victors, their force stronger than the generation that had once hidden them from light. We can imagine the silence when the fighting ended. Where once stood exalted rulers, there now lay the defeated, heavy and chained. All their pride could not withstand the weight of thunder, sea and shadow, joined with the hands of giants and the fire of cyclopes.
Tartarus was not simply a cave or cell. It was the deepest darkness of the underworld, described as lying as far beneath the earth as the earth is beneath the heavens. It was not a place of gentle sleep, but of punishment and despair, a prison reserved for those who committed the gravest wrongs against the cosmos. Here the Titans were sent, dragged down into the abyss, their chains forged with strength beyond breaking, bound forever under the watch of their jailers. Imagine the descent as if falling endlessly, deeper and deeper until even darkness feels distant. For the Titans, rulers of light and air, this was their fate. Eternal captivity where no sky could touch, no earth could comfort. Gods who once walked the peaks of power were reduced to prisoners, their cries swallowed by distance and time. In Greek thought, this was not just a punishment, but a marker of order restored. The old rulers who defied balance had to be kept below, far out of reach, so that the new age could take shape above. Listeners in ancient times may have felt both dread and understanding at this. Tartarus represented the ultimate fall, the loss of glory, the reminder that nothing, not even divine strength, escapes a cycle of change. Just as Uranus had been unseated, so too were the Titans. And though the Olympians now stood triumphant, the story carried a warning. Power itself is fragile, never eternal, always subject to the wheel of time. Zeus ordered the imprisonment with solemn finality. The 100-handed giants became jailers, standing guard at the edge of Tartarus to ensure no escape. It was a fitting symmetry. Beings once locked in darkness now ensured the darkness held its new captives. Within that abyss, Cronus and his brothers sank, their voices fading from Olympus and earth alike. Their reign ended not with gentle retirement, but with eternal confinement, their might now locked away as example for all who followed. Dorum symbols gather here in quiet layers. Tartarus, the lowest of places, echoed with despair, a contrast to Olympus, rising high above the clouds. Between them lay the mortal world, balanced between shadow and sky. The fate of the Titans reminded hearers of the myth, that choices against cosmic order would bear deepest punishment. In this way, the story was not just about gods, but about justice itself, the idea that imbalance cannot last, and that those who cling too long to power must face its loss. Even so,
Their presence lingers in memory. The Titans were not erased, only hidden. Stories continue to name them, to remind each generation of what once was. Their fall served as memory, a cautionary tale of pride and the limits of strength against change. Power passes as seasons pass. Winter gives way to spring. Old orders fade so new ones can rise. The Titan's banishment into Tartarus crystallized this truth in the strongest possible form.
And here is where the myth turns, gently but firmly, toward a new question. The Titans were bound, their days of rule at an end, but the cosmos remained wide, with seas and skies still unclaimed by division. The Olympians had won the war, yet now they faced the weight of ruling what they had freed. Who would take the sea, who the sky, who the hushed realms of the dead? Dividing the world would be the next great act, not of war, but a chance and choice. Their triumph was assured, but their order was not yet written. Barrett so the tale drifts from the thundering violence of chains and thunderbolts into a quieter turning. The Titans sleep in Tartarus, voices muffled in endless dark, their rule shattered and replaced. Above, the new gods stand together, preparing to share what the cosmos offers, and the question moves from who rules to how they will rule, beginning with the drawing of lots that will decide the three realms of existence. After so much destruction, the question becomes simple yet profound. How do the victors share what is left of the world? The war of Titans and Olympians had ended in thunder, shadow, and stone, but victory does not itself create order. With their enemies bound in Tartarus, Zeus and his brothers stood before a cosmos without clear boundaries. The task was not to fight, but to decide, and the way they chose reveals much about how the Greeks saw fate and balance. Rather than claim their realms outright, the three brothers agreed to leave the matter to chance. They would draw lots, allowing fortune, not preference, to rule. Picture the scene. The sons of Cronus, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, stood together, each having carried the weight of 12 years of war, each wanting both power and peace. But they placed their trust in folded tokens, unseen until chosen, as though even gods bow to something beyond their will. The Greeks imagine this moment as not only agreement, but recognition. No one, not even the immortals, could escape the role of chance. Fate still had its word. The lots were drawn. Zeus received the sky. In that moment, he became the one crowned by heaven itself, his throne raised higher than any. The storms and clouds, the day and night that passed overhead, rested in his authority. He was not simply another ruler. He became the figure who looked down from the vastness of Olympus, holding lightning as his mark. The eagle came to symbolize his watch, soaring high as his eye over the mortal and divine. Every roll of thunder, every flash of lightning, reminded Greeks of the hand that now governed above. Poseidon drew the seas. His domain stretched outward without end, waters so deep and wide that mortals crossed them only with fear and reverence. Sailors, when they set out, whispered prayers to him, offering gifts in hope he would keep storms at bay. The sea gave life to trade, to travel, to harvests of fish, but it also threatened destruction with shipwreck and flood. Poseidon's trident, sharp and three-pronged, gave him the power to stir calm surfaces into waves or to quiet storms with a single thrust. He became the embodiment of what humans always felt at water's edge, awe mixed with unease. Earthquakes, too, were linked to his restless force, shaking ground as easily as currents shift. His presence was not just distant, rolling in the deep oceans, but immediate in the trembling of the soil underfoot. And then came Hades. His hand pulled the lot that gave him the realm beneath, the underworld where the dead wandered. It was a place of shadows beyond sun or sea, lit not by sky but by a dim glow carried in memory. To him went the countless souls of mortals after their final breath. The Greeks knew this realm not as eternal torture but as inevitability. All life, no matter how great, ended in his halls. He ruled not with thunder or wave but with silence. Beside him one day sat Persephone, and together they shaped the quiet cycle of death and return. Luck had spoken. None of the brothers chose their realm. It was not ambition that gave Zeus the heavens. It was not Poseidon's will that tied him to seas, nor Hades' desire that led him to shadows. Fate spoke through chance, and even gods bent their heads. This detail carries a calm strength. The Greeks believed not even the greatest could escape the threads woven by destiny. The gods might command, punish, and protect, but still they abided by something higher and quieter, the inevitability of chance, the unseen rhythm that threads through all life. Each brother accepted his portion. Zeus lifted his hand to the heavens, Thunderbolt held aloft as his pledge. Poseidon rested his trident in the sea, waves frothing as if in greeting. Hades lowered his helm, that cloak of invisibility, his silence itself an acceptance. Together their gesture formed a balance. Sky above, sea between, shadows beneath, 3 layers of existence, each tended, each guarded. Mortals living in the middle walked on soil and feared storms above, waves around and death below. In each direction they saw presence, order and the face of one of the brothers. These realms were not just gifts, they built meaning. Zeus's sky taught mortals to look upward, pairing aspiration with respect. Poseidon's seas reminded them of voyage, trade, and the dangerous wealth beneath waves. Hades' underworld echoed their rituals of mourning and the careful need to bury the dead. The cosmos carved itself into 3 domains, each with a ruler's personality mapped upon it, shaping the ways people lived, built cities, and prayed at temples. The balance was not only divine, it was human order reflected back in myth. Think of how these realms guided daily lives. Farmers looked to the sky, watching winds for rain, understanding that Zeus's moods might decide wheat or hunger. Fishermen and sailors watched the tide, their offerings whispering to the sea for calm, knowing Poseidon's displeasure could overturn even the sturdiest vessel. Families attending a funeral prayed carefully, believing that proper rites would ease the soul's path into Hades' kingdom. Each act of life, from harvest to burial, wove itself into the domains shaped by these brothers. We often imagine gods rising distant from human life. But in these divisions, the opposite is true. Here, every element mortals touched connected to a divine realm. This quiet arrangement formed a network between earth and beyond, teaching people to respect what they could not control, yet depended upon each day. For the Greeks, telling the story of lots drawn by Zeus and his brothers was not just myth. It explained the daily rhythm of the world, the water under ships, the thunder above fields, and the hush of death beneath stone. And notice too the harmony hidden inside this division. By sharing rather than fighting, the brothers brought balance after years of chaos. Their choice not to seize but to draw lots emphasized a quiet restraint, a cultural value of moderation that Greeks appreciated. Power fell into 3 hands instead of 1, preventing any single brother from ruling unchecked. It gave mortals reassurance that the world itself was balanced, guided not by one temper alone, but by 3 differing rulers, each bound to respect the other's realm. With the drawing complete,
a new order began. Zeus rose to Olympus, his mountain throne high in clean air, lightning marking his law. Poseidon sank into the seas, ruling from coral palaces, unseen by most, shaping currents under moonlight. Hades dwelt beneath, shadowed halls lit dimly, where Cerberus prowled, and spirits crossed rivers under watch. Together, their moments began, the age still remembered, whenever thunder rumbles, tides surge, or silence embraces the dead. Now, when we picture gods upon Olympus, we see not only Zeus, but the balance of three brothers, each shaping a part of life's circle. Mortals looked upward, outward, and inward, seeing their own journey reflected across sky, sea, and shadow. From this quiet act of chance, the world was ordered again, and divine presence became the mirror of human life.
How does rule from a high mountain shape what people believe? Think of Mount Olympus, rising above the valleys, its peak touched by clouds. To the Greeks, it was more than a mountain. It was the home of the gods, a place removed from the struggles of mortals, yet close enough to watch them. The height of Olympus meant distance, and distance meant wonder. People looked upward, imagining their rulers sitting above, deciding, in calm or in anger, what storms would roll across the land. From such a place, power felt absolute. Zeus, having drawn the sky as his realm, claimed Olympus as the centre of his rule. By choosing the mountain, he set himself apart not with walls or armies, but with height itself. The Greeks believed the gods lived there, eating, feasting, arguing, and watching from their thrones. From that seat, Zeus carried the thunderbolt as the sign of his rule. Its crack across the heavens reminded all that his will could fall, at any moment, swift and final. When rain came, when lightning split the night sky, people did not just see weather. They saw a message from Olympus. Yet the gods who lived on that mountain were not simple forces of perfection. The stories describe them with power, yes, but also with flaws that echo human lives. Zeus did not lead with calm wisdom in every tale. He grew jealous. He grew angry. He loved many times, outside his marriage, leaving behind children who became heroes or wanderers. To mortals, this strangeness made him familiar. He was unreachable, yes, but he also carried tempers and desires human beings understood. From his lofty throne, the ruler of Olympus resembled both a storm in the sky and a man in his household. Herades' symbols helped fix these ideas in daily thought. The thunderbolt was the most known, drawn again and again as the emblem of Zeus. It was not simply fire in the sky, it carried meaning as a weapon of justice. To defy Zeus was to risk the strike of lightning, sudden and destructive. When thunder rolled, it meant order had been restored, or warning had been given. Alongside the thunderbolt came the eagle. Sharp-eyed, wide-winged, it followed Zeus as messenger and companion. Its flight high above mirrored his watchfulness, his ability to observe from above what no human could see. Together, thunderbolt and eagle turned the sky into a mirror of his presence. Even the changes of weather connected to him. Snow, storms, calm breezes, all could be read as moods of Olympus. The power of nature itself was believed to reflect his governance, reminding mortals that their crops, their travels, even their safety depended on forces above them. Seasons, though shaped by many gods, were tied closely to his order. For the Greeks, Zeus affected not only storms but cycles, holding the balance that meant survival. Each shift overhead turned into a lesson about the divine. From the mountain's peak, the gods were near yet distant. People could see Olympus from below in clear weather, its snowy top visible across miles. They could not step upon it. It was too high, too sacred, and too dangerous. This created a paradox. gods that were close enough to feel near, yet far enough to remain beyond mortal touch. It shaped how people prayed. They lifted their eyes, raised their voices, sent sacrifices upward in smoke, all toward that hidden seat in the clouds. To them, the mountain above held both mystery and comfort. What this meant for culture was striking. The gods were not locked away in unknown heavens. They were imagined to live just above daily life, part of the same landscape, resting in halls unseen yet near. This closeness gave myths energy. A farmer could glance towards Olympus, remember Zeus's strength, and feel both awe and caution. The mountain formed a constant presence in view, a reminder of those who ruled every aspect of existence. But Olympus was more than dwelling. It became a symbol. To tell stories of gods, the Greeks set their stage there. They pictured feasts where laughter and rivalry mixed. They described councils where Zeus decided disputes. They painted scenes where gods stepped down from Olympus to intervene in mortal lives, then withdrew again to their lofty home. The mountain became the background for countless stories, shaping art, theatre, and ritual. In time, Olympus represented not just a peak, but the very heart of imagination, a place where divine and human struggles met. Even so, the gods were never spotless examples. Their flaws made them closer to mortals. When Zeus quarrelled with Rhea, it felt like a marriage dispute. When Poseidon showed anger, it seemed like rage stirred in a human heart. The Olympians carried greatness, but they also revealed weakness. By placing them in relation to human behaviour, the myths allowed people to see divine reflection in their own lives. This created meaning. If even gods struggled with jealousy, pride, and desire, then human flaws were part of a larger pattern of existence. Olympus, rising above the clouds, yet imagined as filled with familiar quarrels, held both awe and recognition. People respected the gods' power because they ruled the sky, the sea, and the underworld. But they related to their stories because those gods felt emotions they themselves felt. The mountain created separation, but the myths tied that separation back into daily life, shaping how Greeks prayed, reflected, and built their rituals. It is in this way that Olympus grew into more than a mountain. It became the central image of Greek belief, part landscape, part stage. From there, the gods defined justice, shaped fate, and carried forward human imagination. Painted when people told stories of Zeus's thunderbolt, Hera's watchful eye, or Apollo's song, they did so with Olympus in mind. High above yet visible, beyond reach yet always present, it anchored the myths in a physical place. From that height, the gods held command, not only over natural elements, but also over the hearts of those who believed in them. The mountain was their throne, but it also became the bridge between origin myths and the way people lived. So the tale moves now from gods seated high above into the stories they inspired below. Olympus was never just a home in the clouds. It was a symbol woven into prayers, into city rituals, into art and theatre, into the quiet thoughts of mortals watching storms break across the sky. From the mountaintop order, belief flowed down into the valleys, shaping not only myth, but the life of a people. Every cycle in these old stories begins in silence and ends in balance. From the stillness of chaos to the rule on Olympus, each turn shows us that endings open into new beginnings. Fathers fall, children rise, and order comes even after struggle. As you rest tonight, notice how these patterns echo inside your own life. Moments of fear, renewal, and change shaping the path forward. Myths never rushed, they waited for listeners. Perhaps your own inner story waits in the same way, resting until you close your eyes,
drifting softly toward the order that dreams will bring.